Hey friends, it's Holly from Chic Antique and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making over this dresser I got at Facebook Marketplace. This was $50. It is a Bassett piece of furniture. This is my first Bassett, so I'm super excited. The top is laminate and then the sides are veneer. You can see there's a chip there. And then the rest is solid wood. This is really well made. The drawers are really large. It does have some damage to it on the veneer and the laminate on the top and scratches throughout. So we will be doing those repairs. And the funny thing about this is these two knobs on the top drawer actually do not match. So I'll be replacing those with some different ones from Etsy. I will also be using a new paint brand to me as well as a new color that I've never used before. So I'm very excited about that. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start like I always do by first removing the hardware. After removing the hardware and taking out the drawers, I noticed this weird film on the drawer guide that looked like wax. It looks like somebody burnt a candle and they melted a ton of wax, something like that. And then they put it underneath the drawer for whatever reason. Usually furniture artists like me usually use a wax to help the drawers slide easier, but this is just an obscene amount of wax, so I have no idea why it was in there. Maybe it was an accident, they tipped over a candle. Again, I don't know why you would have a candle in your drawer of your dresser. Who knows? I'm just using my putty knife to remove that, and then I'll vacuum the entire interior of the dresser. After vacuuming, I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning. I'll be using a TSP cleaner on this dresser today, like I always do. This is going to remove any residue or contaminants from the dresser surface so we can have a good clean surface for paint. This piece was a lot dirtier than it looked, so after 2 rounds of cleaning with TSP, I'm coming back with some clean water to remove that TSP and any remaining residue. Next, I'm going to be filling in any damage or scratches. I'll be using DAP Plastic Wood Professional Filler. This does have wood fibers in it, so it's very strong, and it's also alcohol-based or acetone-based, I can't remember, one of those, so it's a lot stronger than your typical wood filler. Usually those are water-based and they're not as strong. This one, because it is not water-based and it has those wood fibers in it, makes it really strong. So you can use this on scratches, gouges, dings. I even used it to repair the missing veneer here. After letting the filler dry, I'm coming back with 120 grit sandpaper and sanding that smooth. After using that 120 grit sandpaper, I did come back and smooth it out even further with 220 grit sandpaper. Unfortunately, when I was filming with 120 grit, my camera died, so it stopped recording. So I only have footage of the 220 grit sandpaper, but I promise I did use 120 grit first. Now we're going back to that 120 grit sandpaper and scuff sanding the entire surface. I'm starting with the top. This is actually laminate, so it has a very shiny plasticky surface. So I want to make sure that I scuff this up really well so that my paint is going to adhere properly. And then of course, after using 120 grit, I finished with a 220 grit sandpaper. Next, I'm going to be removing this decorative piece on the top drawer. I did a poll on my Instagram asking people if I should keep it or if I should remove it. A lot of people said to remove it, mainly just to make it a more modern surface, but ultimately I chose to remove it because of how dirty it is. You can see here I used several rounds of TSP and soap to try and remove that residue, and it just wasn't coming off. So ultimately I decided to remove it. Additionally, I will tell you that this was also completely plastic. It wasn't even a carved piece of wood, so it's not adding any value to the piece. Because this was screwed in, there are now screw holes that I need to fill in, so I'm going to use Bondo to do that. To ensure the Bondo didn't come out the other side of the hardware hole, I put a piece of tape on the back side of the drawer front to make sure it didn't come out that side. Now, because this section is a raw piece of wood, I do want to seal it with shellac, so I'll be using Zinsser Bullseye shellac on this. This, I believe, is cherry wood. Cherry is a huge bleeder, so I want to make sure that I don't have any bleed through or any stains. I'll be priming the entire piece using Zinsser Bullseye 123 primer. This is going to do a couple things. Not only is it going to block any stains or bleed through, it's also going to make sure that my paint adheres properly and also ensure that I have a long-lasting finish. I'll be using a 4-inch nap roller with this. I find that these rollers work really well with this specific primer and help it level out really well. You can also use a paintbrush with this too if that's your preference. I'm also using a small paintbrush to get any hard to reach areas, and then I'm going over everything with the roller to smooth it out. Sometimes I prefer just to use a paintbrush when I'm priming, sometimes I prefer to use a roller. It really just depends on how I'm feeling. And there's no wrong way to do it, so whatever your preference is, either one works really great. But if you're worried about any texture, any roller marks, or brush marks, you can always sand in between coats to smooth out the finish, and that's what I did. After each coat, I did 2 coats of this primer. I sanded with a 220 grit sandpaper. And if you're looking for a modern finish, I always recommend doing that. A smooth finish is always going to look more modern and more sleek than a textured finish. So if you're going for a modern finish, which I am here, you'll want to sand in between all your coats of primer and paint. I usually use a 220 grit sandpaper for this. Another tip for getting a smooth modern finish is using very thin light coats. If you're globbing on the primer, if you're globbing on the paint, it's going to have more texture and it's going to have that thick look to it. So it's best to do thin coats if you can manage that and do more coats if needed, rather than doing like 2 thick coats of paint. It's better to do thin coats, even though it does take longer, and sanding in between, that does also add more time, but it is worth it in the end because it creates a really nice smooth finish. I do like to let my primer dry overnight just so it can harden and start to cure before I start painting. So after letting that dry, I'm going to come back and start painting. I'm going to be using Fusion Mineral Paint today. This is the color Pressed Fern. It is a dark green color. It is very pretty, like a forest green color, and I would say it has a pretty neutral undertone. It is so pretty. I love working with dark greens like this. I'm going to be brushing this on. I'm actually using a new brush to me. I'm using a Fourty brush. This is their nylon polyester blend brush. This was recommended to me by Sarah at 445 Designs. She is one of my favorite artists here on YouTube. So if you're not subscribed to her channel, I will have that linked in the description. Please go subscribe to her channel. You will not regret it. She is just really lovely. She is from Australia, but she lives here in America, and she does really beautiful work. So please check out her channel. Back to the painting, I'm starting first on the top of this dresser. I always like to do that. I am doing long strokes. This is what's going to help you get a smooth finish. So I prefer to go in long strokes in a horizontal fashion and smoothing out each section as I go along with one long stroke. So I'm getting that paint on there, smoothing it out, and then I do one stroke at the end. I'm making sure not to overbrush this and trying to work quickly because paints like this, mineral paints, do dry really quickly, and that's what's going to give you brush strokes. So I'm trying to work as quickly as I can, just getting that paint on there and then smoothing it out in one long stroke. Let's talk about this color a little bit and talk about painting vintage furniture. I know there are a lot of people out there, especially on YouTube, who are considered furniture purists. They believe vintage pieces like this should only be restored, stained, never painted. And I totally understand that, but you also need to realize that there are other tastes out there besides your own. Just because something could be restored doesn't mean that it has to be, and this is a form of art, and it is allowing it to go in a home that may not appreciate it otherwise. Not everybody likes stained furniture, and also some pieces are just sometimes too far gone to be restored. And then there are other artists who don't have the skills to restore pieces like this, and I would consider myself one of those people. I would like to try some more restorations in the future, but I'm just not an expert at it, and painting is just more in my wheelhouse. And I think it is okay to have your preferences, but it's also important to respect other people's preferences. And if somebody is painting something, especially if it's their own piece, it's not fair to judge them. It's really not anyone's place to say what anyone else should do with a piece of furniture. I'm going to be sanding in between coats using 220 grit sandpaper. Fusion recommends recoating the paint within 30 minutes to 2 hours. I am a person who likes to be safe rather than sorry, so I waited 2 hours for this to dry, and then I'm sanding and recoating. I did remove the sanding dust with a tack cloth, and now I'm going in for that second coat. I'm just repeating that same process we did on the first coat, making sure to move quickly, go in long strokes, and just get the paint on there. I did need 3 coats of paint with this, which isn't a super big deal. Because this paint does have a built-in top coat, doing an additional paint is going to add more protection, so I don't mind that. So I wanted to have a little bit of a chat about this paint color. I know there are a lot of people out there who probably would be disgusted that I painted this piece, and especially in this green color. This isn't a neutral color. This isn't really everyone's taste. I'm fully aware of that. It is very modern. Greens are super popular right now, and I really thought that this would suit the piece well and kind of give it a new life and a new style. So I just wanted to say that if you like painted furniture, that is valid. If you only like restored, stained furniture, that is valid. If you like both, that is also valid. And I just want to say that because it is okay to have your own opinion, and all of those opinions are okay. But the problems that happen, especially on YouTube, is that everyone's opinion is pushed on other people. So it's okay to have your own opinion, but that doesn't mean that everyone should think the same way that you do. And it's okay if other people have different opinions than you do and different preferences, especially with furniture. So I just wanted to say, whatever you think of this piece is totally okay. If you love it, that's great. If you hate it, that's also great. But not everyone has to agree with you. So that's just my take on painted furniture. Underneath all the drawers were some little tabs that lift the drawer about like 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch so that they don't drag on each other, and a couple of them were missing those. So I ordered these off Amazon, and I'm just replacing the ones that were missing. And after all the painting is done, I'm going to remove the tape. Because this paint has a built-in top coat, I didn't need to top coat this piece. And it also helps that I did more than 2 coats of paint. I did 3 coats of paint, so that's going to add to the durability of this piece. The drawers are all really clean and really beautiful, but the wood was very dry. So I wanted to use some furniture wax. This has an orange scent to it. So not only is it going to freshen up that wood and seal everything, it's also going to add a nice fresh scent. Little details like this really just make the piece a little bit more special and professional too. I'm keeping the original hardware, but it was very tarnished, so I sprayed it with Rust-Oleum's metallic paint in satin bronze. I'm using this color as opposed to a gold color because I wanted to sort of keep that antique look, and I didn't want to use something too bright. And this piece is now complete, so I'll just remind you what we started with, and then I'll show you what it looks like now. Thank you all so much for joining me on this makeover today. I hope you enjoyed it. Whether or not you like this piece, if you like the color, or if you even like painted furniture altogether, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Just make sure to be respectful and kind, sharing your opinions with me. If you're not subscribed to this channel and you like this style of content, please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell. That way you'll be notified every time I upload. And before you leave, I'd love it if you'd check out some of my other videos. I'll have my most recent upload linked in the eye above, as well as down below in the description. Again, I thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all your support. So I'll see you all next time. Bye. I'm gonna kill these birds. Don't even care. Really? Seriously?